Hey everybody, my name is Carter Walters, and this is my final project for SCC 520. Just to start out, I'll be giving you guys a brief introduction where I'll go over the objectives, the standards, and the anticipatory set I'll be using. After that, I'll go into the presentation, and then I'll come back to you guys and discuss the guided practice, the independent practice, and the closure I'll be having students complete. Just to start out, the objective for my presentation is, given the Google Slides and guided notes, students will be able to recognize, discuss, and compare key facts about the Mongol Empire through a class discussion and a Venn diagram assignment. This lesson will be the groundwork for future historical analysis and comparison. I'll be using two standards for this presentation. The first one will be World History.H.2.4, analyze the rise and spread of various empires in terms of influence, achievement, and lasting impact. The second one will be World History.H.1.2, use historical comprehension to reconstruct the literal meaning of a historical passage, differentiate between historical facts and historical interpretations, analyze data and historical maps, and analyze visual, literary, and musical sources. For the anticipatory set of this presentation, before the bell rings, students will enter the class with the question, what is your favorite movie set during the past, written on the board? Since the question will be on the board before class, I'll give students roughly 30 seconds to determine their answer, and then we'll have a very quick class discussion on it. This can also be used as an effective way to take attendance, as I'll call on everyone to briefly state their choice. Eventually, I'll state that my favorite movie set during the past is Mulan, and I'll then show them a clip from the movie, the music video, I'll Make a Man Out of You. After watching the video, I'll ask students who they think the characters in Mulan are training to fight against, and I'll make sure to bring up eventually that it was the Mongols. And then during the class discussion, I'll also point out that they changed the name of the Mongols to the Huns, a more popular European nomadic group. I'll ask them why they think this is, and what are the implications of changing history to promote a more Eurocentric viewpoint. I think this will be a perfect segue to get students engaged in the Google Slides, as they'll be able to connect it to both a popular movie and modern political problems. All right, I'm going to go ahead and switch over to the presentation. Just a heads up that at the end of every slide, there's going to be a question that I would ask students. But since it's just me here, I'll go ahead and give a brief, like 2-second discussion on it, and then I'll move on. Hey everybody, my name is Mr. Walters, and today I'll be teaching you guys about the Mongol Empire. Just to start out, the state standard we'll be using is analyze the rise and spread of various empires in terms of influence, achievement, and lasting impact. And as you can see right here, the first example of these empires is the Mongols. Starting out with an introduction, what was the Mongol Empire? Well, the Mongol Empire was a nomadic empire that started in eastern Mongolia, right here, and spread across much of the known world in the 1200s. Key figures in this empire include Genghis Khan and his successors. Genghis Khan basically started the empire from nothing, and his successors carried on his legacy after his death. The empire was incredibly vast at its peak, as you can see. It spread from Korea to China to the Middle East to Europe to Russia. The Mongols managed to create such an enormous empire because of two major military developments. The first of these was psychological warfare, and the second one was cavalry, which essentially means horses. Now I'm going to ask you guys, what challenges might they have faced with controlling such a vast territory? Moving on, as we said before, the Mongol Empire has a lot of depictions in pop culture, but they can often be negative or stereotypical. Can you guys think of any other examples besides Mulan, as we said that earlier? Well, there's Night at the Museum. There's Ghost of Tsushima, the video game. There's Clone High. And then another video game, Civilization 6. Moving on to the origins of the Mongols, they originated in the eastern steppe right here. This was essentially a grassy plain where no trees grew and not a lot of plant life grew. This promoted their nomadic lifestyle and culture, as they essentially had to move to live. They had to hunt animals, and that allowed them not to settle down in one certain place. Horses played a key role in their society. Horses were essential for travel, and they also were part of their warfare. Speaking of warfare, warring tribes across the steppes essentially made it so that each region was lawless and uncontrollable. There were hundreds of tribes, and they all fought against each other constantly. But these conditions also promoted a strong leader to unite the region, because if this warring stopped, the forces they had would be unstoppable. Now I'm going to ask you guys another question. How might the nomadic lifestyle of the Mongols have contributed to their military success? That leader we were discussing earlier was Genghis Khan. He was born as Temujin around the mid 1100s in central Mongolia. He was born into a noble family, but had a tough life in exile after his father was poisoned. As said, his father was poisoned by a rival tribe, the Tatars, when he was 9, and he was eventually captured by the Tatars but managed to escape. How do you guys think these experiences shaped Genghis Khan's character? And here's an example of Genghis Khan right there in the movie Mongol. The rise of Genghis Khan. He grew to be a charismatic leader and an incredibly skilled warrior. He was able to rise in power thanks to strategic marriages and friendships. His wife Borte was kidnapped by a rival tribe, prompting him to raise a large army to win her back. After this, he created a code of laws called the Yasa that promoted loyalty and maintained order. And then for my question for you guys, it is said when Temujin was born, he was born with a blood clot in his fist shaped like the earth. And his family is also said to be descended from a wolf spirit. There's little direct evidence of this or any of Temujin's origin story before he created the Yasa. So do you think all of this is true? What could he have gained from this depiction of his early life? Moving on. The start of the empire. In 1206, he was named Genghis Khan, or meaning universal ruler. He developed innovative combat techniques such as fast-moving cavalry and psychological warfare. His army was incredibly disciplined, organized, and promoted merit above all, essentially meaning he didn't raise people up in his army based on political status. He rose them based on how good they were at fighting. Within a few years, he had already conquered vast areas of China and Central Asia. Moving on. As the Mongols continued their conquests across Eurasia, they dominated regions of Central Asia, China, the Middle East, Russia, and Eastern Europe. As you can see on the map on the right, the darker orange is under the reign of Genghis Khan, and the brighter orange is under his heirs at its greatest extent. It literally spread across all of Eurasia. They developed incredibly brutal tactics to do this. Cities were either forced to surrender or be destroyed. During this destruction, no mercy was shown. Entire populations of rebellious regions were destroyed and killed, including women and children. This led to 60 million people, roughly 10% of the world's population, being killed. That's only ever been beaten by one other event, which was World War II. Imagine you're a peasant viewing the Mongol armies approaching. What are you feeling? I just want to discuss a brief anecdote real quick. The Divine Wind of Japan, kamikaze. Most of you have probably heard about kamikaze before, but that's from World War II and the Japanese fighter pilots. But this is the origination of the word, which means divine wind. After conquering China and Korea, Genghis Khan's grandson Kublai Khan looked east towards the islands of Japan. He ordered his army board massive warships, and they set sail towards the island in 1274. Halfway through their voyage, a hurricane destroyed most of their fleet, forcing them to retreat. But he was determined to conquer the island, and another invasion was ordered in 1281. Unlike their previous attempt, they reached the mainland and prepared for invasion. But guess what happened the night of their major assault? Another hurricane came and completely destroyed the fleet again. Talk about a divine wind. All right, next up is Mongol rule, life under Mongol rule. The Mongols were incredibly hands-off rulers, allowing conquered regions to basically just rule themselves as long as they made regular payments to Mongol authorities. Mongol military protections prevented almost all crime, making the lives of the common people like you and me better. Religious freedom prospered, unlike any previous empire as well. This was because the Mongols believed in shamanism, but they believed that shamanism only applied to their own people, so they didn't push it onto others. Does this benevolent rule of the Mongol Empire change how you view them? Finally, I'm going to discuss the Silk Road and Pax Mongolia. The Silk Road was a trade route that was established, boosting trade between the West and East. As you can see right here, it reached all the way to China and then all the way to Europe and Constantinople. This also allowed a postal system which ensured communication across the empire. These networks, here and here and here, helped in the exchange of goods, ideas, and culture. And I know you guys have all heard about Marco Polo before from swimming in the pool. Well, Marco Polo was a traveler from Europe that went all the way to China on the Silk Road, and he wrote about it. Finally, Pax Mongolia is a term that you're going to have to remember. This term is used for the relative stability of Eurasia under Mongol rule during the 13th and 14th century. In 1259, the empire was split into four, one for each of Genghis Khan's descendants: the Golden Horde in Russia and Eastern Europe, the Ilkhanate in the Middle East, Chagatai in Central Asia, and the Great Yuan Khanate in China and Korea. This marked a decline in power for the empire as a whole. Really, the only important one I'm going to want you to remember and we're going to discuss is the Great Yuan Khanate right here. Why do you think they would? All right, I think I'm going to end it there. I would have gone on for a few more slides, and then after that, I would have given students a big picture, open-ended question about Mongolia and how they view Genghis Khan in the modern day. This would have given students another tool to connect history to our modern times. Students would be given 5 minutes to independently write their responses to this question right here, and what they believe is true. After the time is up, students will present their answers to the class, and a short 5 to 7 minute discussion would ensue. This discussion would promote critical thinking, and students should walk away recognizing that history is not black and white. Overall, this discussion will be an incredibly important tool in promoting historical analysis, allowing students to recognize the importance of differing opinions and historical legacies. I'll make sure to call on people who may have shied away from answering the think questions during the presentation to ensure that everyone has a chance to participate. After this discussion, I'll hand a Venn diagram out to students. On this Venn diagram, students would be expected to write their names and the Mongol Empire on one of the sides, and a previously discussed empire in the class on the other. This could be the Mughals, the Romans, the Mayans, the Qing Dynasty, Persia, etc. On this Venn diagram, students would be expected to generate two similarities between the Mongol Empire and their chosen empire, as well as three differences. These responses should be brief, anywhere from a couple words to 2 sentences, but I should make sure that students are actively thinking about what they're writing. To promote unique answers, I'll ask students to come up with answers that they think none of their peers would come up with, while still being relevant to the course material. After 5 to 7 minutes, students will be partnered with 2 to 3 of their peers who chose a similar empire to discuss their answers. In these groups, students will determine what they believe is the most important similarity and what is the most important difference. This activity will promote historical comparison, an incredibly important tool and a crucial part of the North Carolina State Standards. This will also give students another opportunity to bolster their knowledge and understanding of two important historical empires. Overall, this activity is incredibly useful for the lesson, as it, along with a big picture question, will be used to help determine knowledge retention for the day and student engagement. And then for my closure, after the peer activity is over, a quick final discussion will occur in the class, what they have learned from the lesson. I'll start by asking some of the groups about one similarity and one difference they found in their activity. After this, a more general discussion will occur where I'll ask students what they found interesting and what they might have found confusing. Normally, I would like to have this in writing, but due to time restraints for the lesson, I think this is the best alternative. During this period, I'll make notes of what concepts students are having trouble with so that I can sure to touch on them the following day. I'll also make sure students recognize what critical skills they use during the lesson. These will include critical thinking, connections to modern day, historical analysis, and skepticism. Overall, I think this period, the closure period, will be used to determine how effectively the students retained information from this presentation and how useful the questions and assignments were in using that knowledge. This discussion will serve as the exit ticket for the lesson, as it is a valuable way to determine student engagement. At the end of class, I'll ask students to hand both their guided notes and Venn diagrams to me as they leave the room. This will ensure that I can use both works as additional tools to determine a student's knowledge level and participation. All right, that's it. I hope you guys have a great rest of your summer, and thank you so much for this class.